Coming up today on LinkedIn News Live, what has the past 12 months been like in the world of entertainment and business? As part of our Conversations for Change series this Women's History Month, we asked two trailblazers in their respective fields about how they've worked through COVID, the path to making it in their industries, and their take on the fight against systemic racism in the U.S. Hello, I'm Caroline Fairchild, and welcome to LinkedIn News Live, where the business conversation begins with you. It's March 9th, and here's a quick look at the top headlines trending right now on LinkedIn. Record credit card debt paid in U.S., corporate America becoming more automated, and the Burger King ad that sparks ire. Let's take a deeper look into that story. Burger King UK set social media on fire this week when it tweeted, quote, "Women belong in the kitchen." The tweet was part of an ad campaign aiming to bring awareness to a lack of female chefs and announcing a scholarship program to, quote, "help female Burger King employees pursue their culinary dreams." This led to a ton of conversation on the platform. We're going to bring you a couple member comments right now. David Greiner of Adweek said, "Twitter can be a risky place to share polarizing messages and hope people click through to the thread for context." That's the lesson Burger King is learning today. That's certainly true. And here is another comment we have from another member of the media community. Elise Liffring of Ad Age said, "International Women's Day was with a side of misogyny. While it was certainly Burger King's intention to cause a reaction, this might have crossed a line. Many people were disappointed by the brand's choice of language." To join conversations just like this on LinkedIn, be sure to check out the news module to the right of your LinkedIn feed. Or if you're in mobile, you can click into that search box. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a detrimental impact on women in the workforce. And paired with racial tensions happening across the country, this year's Women's History Month comes at a particularly hard time for women and women of color. I sat down with Betty Liu, media entrepreneur and former executive at the New York Stock Exchange, and Issa Rae, producer, actor, and director, on how to tackle the issues we're facing today. I start by asking them what the major lessons are that they've learned since the pandemic began.
I've learned that I tend to overextend myself. That's what this pandemic has taught me. And I've learned different ways to be more efficient without exercising every minute of the day, and kind of regimenting the time I spend working on specific projects. And that sleep is so essential. This, I think for so many of us, this pandemic has kind of forced us to hit pause and reevaluate. And so I took that time to do just that, and kind of changed my approach to even delegating tasks to the team.
I totally agree with Issa. I think, I think the pandemic has had both good and, not so great aspects to it for working women. So definitely feeling that overextension part, and, have had to really learn through this pandemic, the work-life balance and making it very clear cut while working from home. So, it's very easy, as an example, this was actually on the good side. As an example, last night, I'm on a business call, but I'm also cooking dinner at the same time. Talk about, that's work-life balance. Wow. Right there. But I also think that because of the pandemic, people are more accepting of that kind of blending between work and life.
You not only worked through the pandemic, but started a company and raised capital, both things that I do not envy you for having to do virtually through Zoom. I'm presuming a majority of it. What was that like?
It was a lot easier than I thought. I think what has happened throughout this pandemic, and I can only speak for myself, but I've certainly heard this from my colleagues as well, is just it's opened our eyes to how much we can do, how much business we can do from the seat of our homes. We were able to, as you said, build a team, build a company. Virtually, I was able to do this right from my own home here in New Jersey. And we were able to raise, $250 million in our IPO as well from here without seeing one person in person. So I think it's really rewritten the rules of how to do business.
Betty, I actually wanted to bring in a member comment. As I mentioned, we've just seen So many members on LinkedIn join us in conversations around how the pandemic, working through the pandemic, has impacted them. I want to bring in one comment to get your take from a member named Carrie Christos. She said, "The pressures over the last 9 months have been tremendous. I have been the primary breadwinner for 15 years. What's not working is that loyal, talented, hardworking women are not being seen or valued. I gave it my all while I was working from home all summer, only to be laid off in October." Betty, as a former journalist, reading all the headlines just about how working women have been impacted during this pandemic, we saw 1 million fewer women in the workforce just in December alone. What's been your reaction? And for women like Carrie, how they've been able to just persevere through this?
Yeah, I want to say, first of all, I'm sorry to Carrie that she lost her job during this. There have been many stories like that, and it's very unfortunate. And this pandemic has hit women more than men. Millions more women have lost their jobs. And, a primary reason for that is that women carry the load of the home intrinsically. They carry the load much more. And so, they're given a double burden from working from home. So the way I look at it, though, is, and this is very much in line with what I'm looking at through D&Z Media, through our company, is that I think we need to invest more in upskilling our workforce, whether that's women or men, but particularly for women who've been hard hit. Some of the jobs that have been lost might not ever come back. And there's the added pressure in the labor force of automation and other trends that were happening even before the pandemic hit.
Well, speaking of the pressures that working women are feeling right now, we recently surveyed working women on the platform, and we found that 42% of working women have considered quitting their job prior to or as a result of the pandemic, with the number one reason being the need to prioritize their mental health. Issa, I'll check in with you, girl. How is your mental health? How are you talking to your team about mental health through this pandemic?
It's ebbed and flowed, but one way that it's helped is that we have these conversations again openly. We've facilitated conversations with team members. We've had, we set aside team meetings in many instances and just had a general check-in of just, hey, how are you doing? I've reached out to every team member to say, look, if you need to take some time off, if you need to take Fridays off, if you need to take the week off, just communicate that with me. Because, I've also experienced some team members saying that they needed work as a distraction and didn't want to be left alone to just with their own thoughts. I'm one of those people where if I just sit and really think about this dire situation, my mind will spin and then I'll get worse. And so I've used work as a distraction. So I don't know if that's mentally healthy, but I'm doing it anyway. So I might be mentally unhealthy, but that's just been my tactic. But we've, in short, really opened the lines of communication to say, hey, look, this is not a normal thing. And if you don't feel normal, if you don't feel good, express that and we'll accommodate it.
Issa, I think I saw some sort of hint in your SNL monologue that you like me at some point in the pandemic got over the puzzles. No more puzzles. Let's get back to work here.
Real. That's so real. Because at the end of the day, I think we all had a realization like a couple months in that this was not going anywhere. And so to sit in it and, kind of wallow in our own self-pity just felt useless. And so it was just time to figure out how to get back to work effectively.
Absolutely. Betty, you're a mom. Working mothers, they have this, I don't know, I was going to say dual job, but I want to say they have 17 jobs that they're doing right now. What has that experience been like for you?
It's like sometimes it feels like 100 jobs a day. Look, I mentioned before about setting boundaries, while working from home. I think that's very, very important just to be honest, just to keep your sanity and to also compartmentalize the things that you're doing. Me overall, as a working mother, I've always practiced this viewpoint of zero guilt. And that's helped me before the pandemic. And it certainly helped me during the pandemic when my kids are right here in front of me. And it's hard sometimes not to want to step away and be with them. And the zero guilt is really simple. It's just, being extremely focused when you're at work, giving it your 100 and having zero guilt about it for doing that. And then on the flip side, when you're at home, and here, figuratively at home, because we are all at home, when you're focused on your family, having zero guilt there. When you're focused on your family, you're focused on it and work takes a back seat. And I've told my team, I've said, you should practice the same thing when you're with your family. That's it. Unless it's an emergency, we're with our families. And I think that has, that is helpful in keeping that work-life balance, and really also helpful, as you were just talking about with Issa, with mental health too. So practicing that.
I love that.
Yeah, Issa, I saw you nodding back there.
Yeah,
I'm sure you work with
that.
a ton of parents, and everyone has different caregiving responsibilities. What have you heard from them?
Yeah, I'm super sensitive to parents. I mean, I'm not one, and I can only imagine. I've seen the Zoom calls with kids bursting in, and you got a glimpse of people's parental personalities, which I love so much. Just like, oh, okay, I get to see this side of you. But I again, it just comes down to communicate your needs. I completely respect the fact that people need family time. And I also respect the fact that, as I've been told many times, like, I want to get away from my kids, so assign me work. And so I've balanced both.
Well, let's dive into this a little bit more. 62% of working moms that we surveyed said that they've either lied or downplayed their stress around balancing kids and work. I'm going to read a comment here from a member named Sophie, who said, "It was overwhelming trying to provide support to my children while being homeschooled and trying to support my employees. I quickly began to burn out and had to make a hard choice to step away from my career. I do plan to return to the workforce, but not right now, not at the expense of my family and health." Betty, how do we create environments where women feel like they can, like we are right now, speaking openly about these issues?
Well, I think, I think what's been helpful in this pandemic is that everyone, men and women, are facing, more of these work-life balance issues because everyone, is working from home. So that's been helpful. It's just the general awareness of it. And, I think speaking out about it, the transparency, speaking very openly about some of the challenges is also helpful, because I think women tend to take on much more and do it without, how do I say it without sounding, women tend to take on much more and not want to burden anybody else.
And Issa, we've talked about the pandemic, but we also have to zoom out a little bit and think about just the systemic racism, the movement against systemic racism that we're experiencing right now in this country. You've, in the past, discussed just the anxiety and fear that you felt around those protests and how it impacted your business decisions. How did you navigate those conversations with your team?
By creating a forum of expression, I had team members that came up to me and wanted us as a company to do something. And they inspired me, like, yes, we are in the spotlight. We should be facilitating these conversations, and we should be facilitating action. Because for me, it came down to that. We'd had so many conversations, and so many conversations were happening, just even within the media, and the frustration and despair that I felt was like, but is anything going to change this time? And so to know that we were in a position to at least direct and guide people to organizations that were making that change, to actively go out there and make our voices heard, just really united us as a company. And, not everybody in our company is Black. And so to educate some people and to again, facilitate these conversations so that no one was judged for their ignorance, was extremely important to us. And so that really united us in a way that, I'll carry with me for a long time, and we continue to be active about those conversations and the intentions behind some of our projects and our initiatives.
And Issa, many of the characters in Insecure, I'm thinking of Molly and Issa specifically, you portray scenes in which they're working in basically all white environments where race is barely discussed, if not discussed at all. Have you had conversations with your white colleagues around what's happened this summer? And if so, have they been the right conversations?
A lot of my white colleagues have come up to me just to discuss what they could do. And, I'm always open. Some of us can get frustrated, any minority, when you're just like, I feel like I have to learn so much about your culture and you, and I don't necessarily ask you questions. I do the research. And so for me, it's like, please, I hope you do the research first before you come to me, because I'm exhausted. I don't want to spend time like going down the line of everything that's wrong. I think you have to do the reading and the research on your own. And, I'm going to be an open vessel. I'm going to be patient, but just know that up front. And so to receive those texts constantly about like, what can I do? How can I help? it's like, I hope you research this first. There's so many conversations happening where you can just find out. But for the most part, I've just been, I've been like, this is where you can take action. This is where you can donate money, and kind of being a frequently asked question, giving a frequently asked questions checklist to colleagues. But I've even found like forums, even with LinkedIn, I'm sure you guys are very much aware of just how much of a forum that became post these protests. And people just want a place to express themselves and to learn. And the more accessible that is, the more progress you'll have.
Well, Issa, speaking of that exhaustion, I want to bring up another member comment that I want to get both you and Betty's take on. Tia Price wrote in, one of the main emotions I felt as a Black woman in corporate America is loneliness. I've often wondered if the emotions of loneliness, often caused by isolation, being misinterpreted as aloof, sudden, distant, or angry. I've often walked into meetings being the only person of color in the room and not even afforded a warm welcome or small talk. Managers sadly showed absolutely no interest in getting to know me as a person. Issa, what are your thoughts there?
I can identify, but I can also speak from the other side of like, you can't always wait to be approached, because that was my that was my issue of just like, well, nobody even tried, so why should I try? And now I've made assumptions about you based off of what you haven't done. So I think what I've learned is that I have to at least, extend myself in a way before I make a judgment. And then if I extend myself and then recognize that there's no one there to receive me, then I can find a community. But for me, it comes down to finding a community of people who understand and relate. And I understand that can be hard within your work environment, but extending outside of your work environment and finding other people and establishing a community there to just bounce thoughts and ideas and solutions off of is so important.
And Betty, coming up the ranks in both media and finance, I'm sure you walked into many rooms where there weren't people that looked like you. When you hear stories like Tia's, what comes to mind?
Yeah, I can so identify with a story like that because I've been lonely myself, and I absolutely can envision it. It's tough, and I still continue to live through that. As you can imagine, in the finance world, you're often, I've noticed this recently in many of my my calls. I'm often the only woman in that Zoom room. So, we have a long way to go in corporate America in terms of, racial and ethnic and gender parity, but we are taking steps toward that. What we found is that, and I agree with Issa, it's not just being in the room, but also extending yourself as well. What I found and what we found when I was doing some work around board diversity at the New York Stock Exchange is that women are heard when there's more than one at the table.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a boardroom and you're one woman, it's very easy to dismiss her opinion and it's very difficult to be heard. But the minute you put a second woman at the table, the chances of them being heard and being able to support each other and the fact that they can support each other, the chances of them being heard and their opinions counted rises substantially. So, so you start with one, but what we need to work towards, and what I know seems obvious, is to have 2-3 people at the table and eventually parity. And I think we're working towards that, but it's a work in progress, and we're a long way from success.
Well, Betty, I'm glad the three of us are all virtually at this table, and I hope everyone out there can hear us, hear what we're saying, because important messages being imparted here. Betty, I do want to bring us, though, to present day right now, where we're just seeing a very unsettling wave of anti-Asian American crimes happening right now in this country. As a Chinese immigrant, how does that impact your ability to show up at work?
Look, I've been reading the headlines myself and just, horrified with the news that I'm seeing on a daily basis. It actually made me think the other day to tell my dad, who's 86 years old, to be careful when he's walking around. I just, the number of crimes that involved elderly Asian Americans has been very frightening to me. I'm glad that there is another awakening to just, racism and anti-Asian violence. And I think the more people of prominence that I've seen speak out on it and draw attention to it, I'm very glad about that. There needs to be much more attention paid to this. And, as corporate leaders, I think we need to speak out on it as well. But it's not just important to speak out, but it's also important to walk the talk. So, I've been pleased to see some of these companies, put some money to work and to walk that talk. But, we certainly have much more to go on that.
And Issa, this awakening that Betty is talking about and the hope behind that, I actually want to go back to earlier on in your career, before this awakening was happening, before these conversations were happening, when you were working on your web series, The Misadventures of an Awkward Black Girl. You were encouraged to take Black out of the title entirely. You put it out there. It was a huge success. What did that tell you about the void that you were filling with that work?
I mean, it just reaffirmed what I knew and what I felt personally, just that we didn't have this representation. We didn't have these stories being told about us. And there's a constant encouragement to kind of erase Blackness in an effort to, I'll use an older term, to integrate, to kind of fit in. And I think what we felt was just like, no, I want to be Black and fit in. I want to acknowledge my Blackness while still being able to be acknowledged in some society. And so that only affirmed, like, I want to continue to create these stories where I'm intentionally highlighting the Black experience, or one of many Black experiences. And that continues to be my priority.
I wanted to piggyback on what Issa was saying and the prior question around just the anti-Asian violence. I think it's also a great opportunity to unite for the different groups, for African Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, to unite and have their voices heard against racism in this country. And what I wouldn't want to see is that, incidences like this divide our community. And so I think it's a great opportunity for us, an important opportunity for us to all unite and speak out, on this racial violence. So that's number one. Number two is, we saw this, Caroline, I'm glad you mentioned this. I mean, we saw this trend when I was at the New York Stock Exchange, and we were putting together a slate of candidates, diverse candidates, to be put on boards. As you know, board diversity is a key issue. And it is one where we are making some progress, where you're seeing more and more people of color being put on boards. But the disproportionate number of people that were being put on boards was white women. And so, we've made progress there, but now is the time to focus on racial parity on boards and to bring African American, Asian American, Hispanic American people on, and LGBTQ, to put those people on boards. And I think that, you're starting to see companies set that example. I think there is more attention paid on that. But, again, I hate to sound like a broken record. There's a lot more work to be done on it. I think in many ways, the first step is when you look at equality, the first step has been to look at, women and white women have been the focus of that. But I think it's now time, and I see that happening, where the shift is from women, as there's been more progress made there, from women now to looking at racial and ethnic diversity.
I'd like to piggyback off of what Betty said there just as well, because I'm so glad that she said it. Just in terms, it touches on allyship, and there's only so much that, we can do, the victims of systemic racism can do to change minds. But if you do have allies who are speaking out on your behalf, and that was something that encouraged me, even seeing with the racial uprisings in June, is seeing who was on the front lines, who was educating other people to make a difference. It can't just fall on us. And it touches on, even the issue with parity with white women. I think that it's so important for white women to talk to other white women, for white men to also talk to, others to help make that change, because it can't just be up to us.
Mm-hmm. Right. Allyship is critical. Representation is also critical. Issa, Betty was just talking a little bit about the work she's doing with representation on boards. you're doing representation for the big and small screens. And I read that you sometimes struggle to get to green light studio projects where you're trying to portray the Blackness of characters. I was just interviewing Lee Daniels last week, and he hit on the same theme. Have you seen movement since the start of your career? What encourages you in terms of how an entertainment industry in general is thinking differently about representation?
What encourages me, I think, just the work that we're doing, the dedication that we have. I know that I'm not going to give up. I know that I've also established a lot more relationships within this industry than I had, a couple of years ago. And so I feel less scared to broach these conversations and to call them out. I don't fear for my career as much, where like if I speak out too much, I may be blackballed. Like I don't have those fears because I also have a voice, and I wish somebody would try, So I think that is encouraging. And just again, to go back to the allies that I feel like I have in this industry, I feel like I have a platform and am encouraged by certain allies to speak up.
And Betty, finance, the industry that you're working in right now, it's largely male dominated. Were there any pivotal moments for you where you realized you were going to have to work a little bit harder to greenlight your own career, in a sense?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I always knew that I was going to have to chart my own path because there aren't that many people like me in my field. And, before finance, I was in media, and that was also very male dominated. So I always knew I would have to take some risks and again, chart my own path. So I went from journalist to entrepreneur to then, one of the senior executives at the New York Stock Exchange, and then now building another company. And, people have said to me, that's a very unconventional path. What was the driving force behind it? And, my answer to that is if I didn't I couldn't wait around for someone to give me that opportunity. I had to make those opportunities for myself. And I knew I had to.
Before I let you both go, for the girls that are watching this, looking up to you, seeing what you've accomplished in your career, what's your message to them as they're just starting out right now and seeing the adversity that they're going to have to face, but still have just such dreams and aspirations to become the next Issa or the next Betty? Issa, I'll start with you.
I would again say to find your community. For me, it's come down to really just gathering people who are like-minded and creating a space where I can be open and encouraged. So I encourage young girls like to work with people who are as passionate as you are and build with them and establish a community.
Betty, what about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And Caroline, by the way, you're handling this with grace.
Yes, killing it.
You're doing a great job. And I'm so glad I'm on this panel with both of you. I would say my advice to young women is, get rid of your limiting beliefs. I think we often grow up and we have these phrases in our head that we can't do this, or it's not possible to do this or that. And I call them limiting beliefs. And I think, you should just be aware of them and to get rid of them, because really the sky's the limit. It really is. And, and I know it sounds kind of hokey, but you really can accomplish whatever you put your mind to. And it's really yourself that holds you back. So whatever limiting beliefs you have, note them down and then get rid of them.
Cosign.
That was Issa Rae and Betty Lou joining us for our series, Conversations for Change. I'm seeing so many members joining us in this discussion. I'm going to read a couple member comments right now. Judy says, I'm in the UK and I resonated so much with Insecure. Hence why I was so inspired by you, Issa. There's a huge void to have real life experiences on the screen, particularly for Black women. Thanks for joining us, Judy. And then we also have Miriam talking to us about how she's been around a table of 25 women. She says women need to truly support each other. In my community, lately, it seems that people prefer to have control over someone compared to wanting to help. So Judy, Miriam, thanks for joining us on LinkedIn News Live, and to all of us for joining us in this important conversation. Tomorrow on LinkedIn News Live, we're continuing our Conversations for Change this month, Women's History Month, examining what a bold plan to help working mothers re-enter the workforce may look like. We're speaking live with the founders of Girls Who Code and the founder of New Power Media. I'm Caroline Fairchild. Thanks for joining us on LinkedIn News Live.